that was Taylor Swift singing about the magic code number that is 22 that we explained in the Christianity jokes yesterday. That's the jokes that are used to take over the whole of the geopolitical world. They use armies too, but it's ever so clever. And this is the Gladiator theme tune, which has become so iconic. And we explained in the videos yesterday how after the Jews had been culled in the Jewish revolutions by the new elites that were the Christians, that the numbers dropped from 8 million to 3 million, and many of those deaths were in gladiatorial roles. Okay, I'm going to play you a little bit of this because the music is really inspiring. That bit, incidentally, is still a massive joke for the world's elites. That is, that bit, "now we are free," in the Gladiator movie about slavery, is still a joke, and the slavery is still openly declared as being one of the moral things that the Christian Bible represents and the Talmud totally defends. The concept of corrupted kings, queens, emperors, and even democracies like the Uncle Sam joke. That's Samuel in the Bible. There was a period in the Bible when the lawyers were in charge. That's the transitional regime. Okay, I'm gonna switch that off now and show you the mythology about characters in mythology like him, who's an Australasian actor. I think he's a Kiwi. Okay, and all of them make a fortune from falsifying the history of the world, and all of them become heroes for all of the world's enslaved people. It's quite difficult for a person who thinks about their role in life and the psychology of world leadership to put all of those things together and not to feel really sick about it. But let me show you a philosophical debate on those themes. So this is the man Harris, who the Harris name is through all of these stories, because the Nuremberg inquest chair is Whitney Harris and Rolf Harris is a cover.
Is that for me, Caesar? Caesar.
Tell me again, Maximus. Why are we here?
For the glory of the Empire, sir.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, sir. Do you see that map, Maximus? That is the world which I created. For 25 years, I have conquered, spilt blood, expanded the empire. Since I became Caesar, I've known 4 years without war. 4 years of peace in 20. And for what?
Sorry, let's just take that back. So, the Roman Empire is one of the biggest that ever existed, entirely resorting to brutality and the conscription of armies from all of the conquered nations. All of them, they're quite happy in Rome to send them to their deaths, and the most feared man in the Roman Empire is a Spaniard. in the mythology, okay? And when you see the name Maximus, you realise that that's a joke about the world's elites, because Max Aitken and all of those people that rise to the top of the food chain, even the people that come and fish with me on the river, they christen the name of their children Max, and it is a statement about their power base or their impending intent to make them really, really powerful and part of the world's biggest peer pressure groups. There we see the man in the furriest gear. Now the furriest joke is a joke about the writing the Piso family into the history of Christianity and the history of Rome and the Roman power base. Okay, you can see that in earlier videos. If you look up George Lee's Furious and the Piso frauds, you'll find it eventually. So this is the Australasian actor who is actually portrayed in these movies as a Spaniard to be the head of the massive armies, and then when the Marcus Aurelius decides to give the empire over to him as a very effective warlord, and he's going to make him the emperor of Rome. He's never visited Rome, and they have a debate on what Rome's all about. Let's listen into that, because Rome is actually a really sickly place. They've got the plague there already, and the politics in the Senate and all of the senator base that stab people in the back, at least in the historical versions. We explained yesterday how Nero, who's alleged to be a fat bastard that sits around on his butt and plays the fiddle as Rome burns, he actually had some of the Pisos, who are the world owners for vast tracts of time, he actually had the courage to have them assassinated or killed. Yeah, because they were trying to manipulate the empire of which he was the boss. Eventually he was taken out too. Okay, it's amazing. And the name of the person that took him out was a black slave in the household, and his name is linked to the name for one of the Greek goddesses, that is Aphrodite. So it was the slave Epaphroditus yeah, actually took Nero out in the end on behalf of the Piso family, who then get linked into the moneylenders and the assassination bureaus that for the whole of the rest of human history run the world. Okay, let's see what their conversation's about, because Marcus Aurelius and the actor who played him, Harris, knows that if you take on a vicious role in history, then you are beginning to restrict your prospects of living a long and healthy life. And he had to be talked hard into taking on the role of someone in the Harry Potter movies, yeah, which laughs about witchcraft, even although the Roman Church killed all of the residual witches and all of the pagans across our world, certainly on the European front. Okay, right then, so let's hear the philosophy of the leadership of Rome and what they live for.
I brought the sword. Nothing more.
Caesar, your life, please.
Please don't call me that. Come. Please. Come sit. Let us talk together now. Very simply, as men. Well, Maximus, talk.
I've seen much of the rest of the world. It is brutal and cruel and dark. Rome is the light.
Yet you have never been there. You have not seen what it has become. I am dying, Maximus. When a man sees his end, he wants to know there was some purpose to his life. How will the world speak my name in years to come? Will I be known as the philosopher, the warrior, the tyrant? Or will I be the emperor who gave Rome back her true self?
So sadly, Rome is in a similar position to the position that we have in Westminster, London, the City of London, the City of New York, the City of Washington, and all of the other cities that are subordinated to them all across the G8. That includes the Russian capitals. All of the elites that run Britain and America run the rest of the world. Yeah, the French have a token input. The Italians used to have a say. That gets lesser and lesser as their politicians become more intent of enjoying the orgy yeah, than taking on the political roles to manipulate the whole world of politics as puppets. Right then, let's get back to the religious fraud, which is bigger than anything else in world history. And we got to this point on the Abelard Droyklin website, which is www.ivantic.net /ostali_knidgy yeah /trueauthorship.pdf. okay, and we got to the point where we were talking about in the New Testament Piso is also Aquila, which meant eagle, and Prissa or Priscilla is his wife. Okay, so the author of the New Testament writes himself into the story either as Joseph or Josephus or Joseph of Arimathea, and it's all directly linked to the Egyptian myths and the Egyptian religious stories involving Joseph and the coat of many colours. That's in video number 2 on this in this series. Okay, so Piso is also Aquila, which meant eagle, and Prissa or Priscilla is his wife. His wife his true name was Boionia Priscilla, and that takes you into the Bono jokes. And I think it's Bono that is married to Madonna, yeah. And that is all the New World Order way of taking the attention of the real figures in world history. Yeah, and Madonna is one of the most inspiring women on our globe now, but I'm led to believe from the vibes that I'm getting and my glances up to the skies that the person who took over from Madonna at the Brits celebration is a body double, and that she may have been taken out. I have no way of knowing that, but I rely a lot on the vibes from the skies. She also appears in Timothy 2, written by their son Justus, as Lois. Now I've got some pictures somewhere of Lois in popular culture, as it says further down. Let's read that first. So in the New Testament, so fittingly she appears in literature as Superman's wife and Timothy's grandmother. Okay, Justus was his father's main successor. When Justus and his father started the writing of Acts, Justus played Paul, the hero, as his father had created, and played the role of Jesus. Let's see what the Lois name has to offer in popular culture. Oh no, it's not on that one. Oh, I had a series of Google images open, but I've lost them now. Let's see if we've got it there. Oh no, there we go. So there is Lois Lane. She is the wife or girlfriend of Christopher Reeve, the actor who died in his 30s because he fell off the back of his horse. God is wide awake, watching all of them as they enact out all of their vicious roles in life. That's Christopher Reeve, who played the person in the elites at the conference with Lady Darlington in Middle England. Yeah, that's elite Downton Abbey sector England, where they have conferences with the Germans and the Yanks to decide the fate of Europe in World War II, and Christopher Reeve made the mistake of playing the actor who declared that he wanted to make war a much more professional activity. Yeah, so this is just a bystander's observation on the name Lois in the defrauding, which is the whole of the history of Christianity. Yeah, and she is part of the man who is portrayed as a supernatural hero who's prepared to fight in defence of the free world. Yeah, Lois Lane. The linkages are all as flimsy as that, but their lifelines are really short if they take the risk yeah, of riding the horse, knowing about the hippo joke and the hippos joke. The hippos is the Piso name in Greek, yeah, and it's as simple and as facetious as that. So let's get back to the list of the dogmas and all of the stuff that they perpetrate as the leaders of the Christianity movement. Okay, so Lois, fittingly, she appears in literature as Superman's wife and Timothy's grandmother. Justus was his father's main successor. When Justus and his father started the writing of Acts, Justus played Paul the hero as his father had created and played the role of Jesus. That's Paul the evangelist who took Christianity across the Med and into the whole of southern Europe and through the Holy Lands in between and through Syria and all of those turbulent nations who never get a life, because Christianity is perpetually competing with the other religions that the really clever people like the Pisos have planted in every country in our globe, so that every country can be destabilized by religious wars or sectarian division. At the same time, about the year 96 AD, his father was preparing to write his Vita, that's like his life story, and in it Piso would insert Justus as his true name. Justus twice, between his brothers Hyrcanes, actually Julius, who is in the New Testament John, and Agrippa or Simonides, who is actually Proculus and the New Testament Simon. In his Vita, Piso makes Justus an alleged Jewish historian who had written a conflicting history of the Jewish war and falsely accused him, Josephus, of causing his native Tiberius to revolt against Rome. He tells of Justus's career as the revolutionary leader at Tiberias and says his father was Pistos. Can you see the links to the episodes in the Bibles? The pistols, the pistors, we explained that one yesterday. All of it becomes iconic for violence, false news, and the false newsman in Britain is Robert Peston. Yeah, he's the economic analysis expert from the BBC, and when you analyse that, it takes you into the town of Preston in northern Lancashire. All of it becomes a massive joke because those places are full of people who are aware of the joke, and they are undermining the whole of society's capability for 2,000 years or thereabouts. Seemingly because pistis was the Greek for faith and could also be seen as akin to the name Piso, as was pistor in Latin, he gives Justus a brother or brother-in-law named Jesus. You might have heard of him before. He never lived. That's their biggest belly laugh. And that, I believe, is what the song 22, sung by Taylor Swift, is all about. It's in the video number 2 I made on the Piso's wording code to identify themselves as the authors of the New Testament. Okay? And also to do all of the manipulation of Jewish history and Jewish politics. Okay? So Taylor Swift is all over, since I made that video yesterday, she's all over the British newspapers today. She's alleged to be one of the most powerful pop singers in the world age 25. They have not put the number 22 in, which is what I talked about in yesterday's videos, all over the front page of the British papers as we begin to carve up the new political sector. But thank you again, David Cameron, because you're beginning to concede that your economic policies, covered up by people like Robert Peston, are now acknowledged as criminal and greedy economic policies. It's absolutely pissing down its side, because that is what the media do now. They live their whole lives undermining society, and I don't know how they live with themselves. Right then, so justice appears in his own acts. So Taylor Swift sang 22, which is a joke about the religious fraud for 2,000 years, but Taylor Swift is actually created to cover up the money laundering crimes of Swift incorporations and all of their subsidiaries under secretarial and directorial companies, and that is a massive, it's one of the biggest laundering tools in the world, and that's why she has to be covered up. That's why she was launched. That is why she's iconic, and she sings songs about Shakespearean output, Romeo and Juliet. The songs are lovely, which is why I played one of them at the beginning of this video. I dare not show you the pictures because that will be copyright infringement, and it means I get banned globally. Justice appears in his own Acts 1:23 as Joseph called Barsabbas, who was also called Justice, for he is hinting that is become the new Josephus, the new father of the story. Justice's name appears again in Acts 18:7 as Titius Justus, and when Frankie Howard gets his hands on even the residues of the Villa Papyri, which is in I forget what the name of the comedy was, it's called Herculaneum, it's called Naples, or it's called the mosaics, and all of the finds that they find under the lava is in Frankie Howard's comedies about Pompeii and up Pompeii. Do you see that the titillation comes from all of the names and all of the lore that surrounds that, and the BBC use it as a belly laugh, because it underpins all of the genocides, all of the holocausts, all of the religious wars, and all of the demonizations that lead to war in the first place. A few years later, about the year 105, Justice writes the Gospel of John. In it, he stresses repeatedly, especially in chapters 10, 12, 14, 16, that he is sent by his Father and is his representative. Okay? He is teasing that the Father whose work he is continuing is his own. That's the Piso. Okay? He names this gospel after his brother Julius, pseudonym, and himself plays the role of Jesus in it. There is no disciple James mentioned in this gospel, despite the importance of James as one of the three chief disciples in the synoptic gospels, because Justice is playing the lead role, Jesus, and therefore he cannot insert himself in the story as two main characters at the same time. It's like Hitchcock just peeks round the corner just to let you know he's there and that it's his work. Shortly after writing the Gospel of John in 105 and playing the lead, Jesus, in it, Justice, under his identity of Paul, assisted by his son Julianus, pseudonym Timothy, writes the epistle to the Colossians, and in it, at Colossians 4:11, they refer to Justice proudly as Jesus, who is called Justice. And it reminds you always of the film about the life of Brian and all of the parodies and everything that they say about all of the facts being written, and the stonings. You're not allowed to be a woman at a stoning, because we suppress the women like we suppress all of the other false religions once Christianity gets on top. Yeah, and the pythons are a vital link to the truth about the religious frauds. Yeah, because they're sophisticated people. They understand entirely that there never were any messianic leaders, so they make jokes about it, and that confirms that when they laugh at the Rothschilds and the shrubberies that they're awarded for brutalising the world, all of it makes sense. And I've explained the Knights that say Ni is about the use of the Hebrew letters Ni at the beginning of the word Piso in the Hebrew conversion. That's the Knights that say Ni on behalf of the Monty Python's income. All of them are in the tax havens. All of them are making jokes about the Canadians being lumberjacks at the head of the Bank of England doing okay, and the Basil Fawlty joke is about the big bank at the centre of Switzerland that runs all of the frauds in peacetime and in wartime and launders the Nazi gold too. Okay, his father too had hinted that Justus and Jesus had become identical, for in his Vita, having made Justus the revolutionary leader at Tiberias, he later gave Tiberius's chief magistrate the name Jesus. Okay, Justus would live on into the reign of his nephew Antoninus, Claudia Phoebe's elder son, which commenced in 138 AD, and then would write as Justinus, longer form of Justus, the witness. That is, the witnesses. Yeah, that is Justin Martyr, church father. In his dialogue with Trypho, he would boast that prayers in the name of Jesus were being offered by every race of men. That's true now. All of the races that were planted by the gods on the natural continents, where they were equipped with their skin colour and all of their habits and everything that was born in them as innate behaviours, to live in a sustainable way in those places where God planted them, or the gods planted them. I'm too simple to know. I don't believe that humans were supposed to know how the gods put the universe together, and mystery is part of the art, but we're not allowed to have that. We just have dogma from all of the false religions. Pliny shared with Justus the writings of Acts and the Pauline epistles. Yeah, can you see it? The Pistor joke, the episodes. Yeah, and the Pauline bit is the joke about St. Paul, the tax collector and the evangelist, who claimed that Jesus Christ is the new God. Yeah, and that Mary is the mother of God, and that is really offensive if you're capable of creating a universe, because there was never a Mary, and that's why it's pissing down outside. And when you look at the pathetic chapters that I've looked at today on Jonah, yeah, and the whale issues and being inside the belly of the beast, and when you look at the Pinocchio film, it's a massive joke about the displacement of gods, and it's been pissing down for most of the afternoon, and the clouds have been really low and whipping over the town. I did not really appreciate the mistake I've made in recent videos on the Pinocchio issue is that he is not the son of a shoemaker. That is Archbishop Hudel in the Nazi diasporas, but he is the son of a carpenter, like thickin' Jesus in inverted commas. Yeah, and the whole of that then becomes a joke about his dad, who's called Geppetto. Yeah, the T in the Piso word is the Christian cross. That's God Petto. Yeah, he then gets displaced, and they have a character called Jiminy Cricket with the initials JC, like Jesus Christ, yeah, who wanders around as the little wooden boy who's born as a puppet, a wooden puppet, and that's the wooden Christian cross joke. Yeah, the whole thing is a belly laugh at the gods in the sky's expense, and you can see the rain is pelting off the pavements out there. Yeah, right then. So watch I'll make a video in the next 2 days on the simple little movie that is the Walt Disney portrayal of the Pinocchio movie. It's a massive joke about the real gods being replaced by these literary frauds. Yeah, and it's underpinned by violence all around the world, and the Roman army is particularly good at that. If you cannot fight in the army, you'll become a gladiator, and even if you piss on your ankles like the guy in the film, you're gonna get it in the neck somehow. Yeah, and all the tigers that come jumping at them are the jokes that I explained yesterday. There's the pussycat again, looking a little bit sinister in the dark, like a black panther in one of the Panther movies about the diamonds in Switzerland, and the lack of law enforcement, because we get people like Clouseau to look into that, and his man Cato is actually an interlocking director on the Rothschild's boards, and all of it is sick, sick, sick. Right then, where did we get to? Oh, we've got an Apollos in this one. That's the space program again. Okay, so because now that Pliny was the writer and hence also playing the lead character Paul, Justus could not play Paul but needed a new identity. Then in Acts 18:24 and 19:1, Pliny gives Justus another name, Apollos. He is secretly the former Paul, Paulus or Paulus, with an A added. Okay? And within a couple of years, Pliny could write 1 Corinthians. Again, he repeatedly inserted Justus as Apollos. 1 Corinthians 1:12, 3, 4-6, 22, 4-6, and 16:12. Because as the writer, Pliny was himself playing the lead role Paul, and when Pliny wrote as Paul the epistle to Titus Julius, again he put Justus in as Apollos. Unlike Justus, who would live on into the 140 ADs, Pliny would perish in 116 in western Parthia while fighting the Jews and Parthians. This war, I'm not sure where that is, this war was connected with the second great Jewish revolt of 115 to 117, where the Pisos are the generals in the culls, yeah, against the Pisos' own Roman Empire. Pliny's death was under his military name Maximus. Yeah, I can show you again with the furry collar. Yeah, Maximus, the power base, still the power base. Max Aitken is Lord Beaverbrook. Yeah, and all of it is a massive joke. Yeah, and the Maximuses that I've met are really decent people on the outside, but they're all involved in healthcare in sub-Saharan Africa, and have explained to you all of the ecological scams about the whiteboards and the people. Yeah, Max is the name of their child, and the name of the man is Ellison, and that's an intimate part of the Christian Mass, the Eleison. It's part of the lyrics of Mozart's Requiem. Okay, but they're really nice people and they tip well. That's the last income stream I got before the Freemasons scammed me out of all of my job prospects. I'm gonna bring it down on them in a big way, and they know it now. The Great One, okay, Maximus, the Great One, the direct translation. That's the name of the slave in the Hollywood mythology. Yeah, and he also plays the role of the lynx to the people that take you back to the hamlets. Yeah, that's the sons of Moses, and the person who built the great boat for the biblical floods, that's Noah. Okay, and the story about the whale is just pathetic in the Bible. It has no logic, it has no content, you cannot see a motive for writing it, and that is why it's much more explicit to watch the Hollywood output. And the Walt Disney Company that made that movie are now the biggest Jewish corporation on the globe, and they sponsor the British Time Team as well. That's why world history is so twisted. So Maximus is the great one in the Roman Empire, as a little laugh up your sleeve. Later, Maxima, the feminine form of his pseudonym, would be combined with the feminine form of the name of the Piso founder, Calpus, with also the change of a vowel, to produce the expression Maxima Culpa. In addition to repeatedly inserting themselves in the story, the Pisos hint at their family's relationship to the Herods. Great Herodian, my kinsman, says Romans 16:11. It's authored by Proculus, Piso's third living son, who inserts himself, do you get it? He inserts himself as the writer Tertius, the third in Romans 16:22. Among Jesus' followers is Joanna, the wife of Chusa, steward of Herod. Luke 8:3. Manaen, that's not Manaen, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, who in the that could be the Mannheim, all of the places lead to massive university linkages, who in the original Greek is literally foster brother of Herod the Tetrarch, is one of the prophets and teachers of the young church in Antioch. That comes into the jokes by the Pythons, and that becomes where they launch the hand grenade. Everything they laugh at is a condemnation that it's false history and it is brutal and leads to millions and millions of casualties and deaths, most of them innocent bystanders, conscripts or gladiators. Acts 13:1. The family also put their friends into the story. Justus inserted Cornelius Tacitus, and that's the tacit truths of any stories are just a joke about the false writings. Yeah, the Roman historian, he's the one who wrote about the Scottish wars in 79 AD, when we began to have our quakes in the Dunblane region, right across to Oban and into Dundee, where they made the Bonnie Dundee films, and they made the films featuring the actor who's the Chancellor at Dundee University, Brian Cox, and all of that is about the taking of Scottish women who are married into Scottish bloodlines, raping them and dispossessing them of their land and eventually their husband. That is the Rob Roy McGregor film. I forget what its name is. He became Cornelius the Roman centurion in Acts chapter 10, who was devout and feared God. Tacitus reciprocated by dedicating his dialogue on oratory. Yeah, it's got to be ever so posh when you stand up the podium and inspire all of your cheated listeners that you're the man for that job. Now there is no division between any of the political parties. They are just totally corrupted to dismember society by design, and that's why the newspaper stories are so sad, and that's why I slightly admire David Cameron, because he knows that the news is out now and that he's got to reform his policies, otherwise yet the acts of God are now obvious to him, and he's become God-fearing, and that is a really good place to start the concept of civilization. So you need oratory to run the world badly. Shortly after the year 100, to dear Fabius Justus, that's reference 11, Piso's father's friend and encourager, Aeneas Seneca, Do you notice how many of them are anuses or body parts? And the Seneca thing is the tablet for constipation. Yeah, it's the medication. The Senna tablets are what we use to get things ballistically coming out of our anus. Yeah, he is the Ananias who cures Paul's blindness in Acts 9:17-18, and he is Aeneas whose paralysis Peter cures in Jesus' name in Acts 9:33-34. Aeneas was an appropriate name also because, according to some accounts, Aeneas was the father or grandfather of Romulus. Virgil said it was to Aeneas that a star shot down from heaven, disclosing to him the spot at which Rome should be established. Do you see the parallels with Bethlehem? And when you see the parallels with Joseph going to Bethlehem to pay his feckin' taxes, yeah, in Paul's day job, yeah, then you see the jokes about the Egyptian equivalent and the role of Joseph and the coat of many colours. He went to Egypt, yeah, as a slave, and he became an icon for capitalism and an inspiration to the Pharaoh who's the god on this earth for the Egyptian nation. And then capitalism becomes the focus of the El-Fayeds out of Egypt, and all of a sudden there's a risk to all of the in-laws in the royal family, because the Arabs then fund all of the killings and all of the terror campaigns. They are not the thinkers, that's the Jewish brains behind that, and all of the British monarchs just lazily tag along, but they have a sly laugh at it. And when they bring down the Twin Towers, they have an office in the building, and they're in the city that day, and all of the cover-ups are absolutely ruthless, and they use the little red doll like the Schindler's List movie, yeah, and they make that part of the history of the day, and they put it in the museum for a laugh. That's Princess Fergie and Prince Andrew, the head of the British trade delegation, yeah, for a whole decade after that brutal event. Chapter 7, the creation of the church. Some affirm that we say, let us do evil things that good things may come. Okay? Yeah, that's the homeopathy thing in the medical world. Romans 3:8. As the 3 years after 70 rolled by, the Jews continued rejecting the story. Piso's successive versions became increasingly anti-Jewish, but still he was prohibited by the Vespasian emperors from taking the tale to the non-Jews. Then in 96 he and Pliny assassinated Emperor Domitian, second son and last survivor of Vespasian. Nerva became emperor, named the Pisos to his council, and allowed them to do what they pleased. The family began writing the Acts of the Apostles, for thus far they have a hero who says he comes only to the lost sheep of Israel, and who hesitates to scatter his bread to the dogs. They need a second hero, one whom Jesus will instruct from heaven to open the new faith to the non-Jews. Justice will start that story and create and play the part of the new spokesman, Paul. You've got a Paul in the Beatles. Yeah, I don't know why Ringo is named Ringo. Yeah, and you've got, and the Beatles and all of the bands, there are huge numbers of bands being inserted to cover the truths that I'm telling. Yeah, when you look for things on the search engines within the last month to 6 weeks, they have gotten really jumpy that all of the news is coming out and it's irreversible this time. Okay, which is why I'm reproducing the true authorship story, and I'm going to do it again and again and again until everybody understands it. Okay, the vehicle for the transformation of Paul from persecutor to apostle is his remarkable vision, all in the story, which in turn rests on his experience in observing the stoning of Stephen. Watch the Monty Python's Life of Brian stoning episode. You will hear them quote Deuteronomy that we must, the first rule of all of the rules that were given to us by the one true God is that we must not worship false icons or humans or Babylonian nations. Yeah, we must only worship the creator of the universe, the one true God in the skies. All of a sudden he's subsidiated, or she or they are subsidiarized by Jesus Christ. And all of the hymns that we sing now, almost all of them, mention Jesus Christ as a direct parallel or a pseudonym for God. That's why it's pissing down outside. Okay, the robes of the witnesses to the stoning are even laid at Paul's feet. And the capitalist story is in the life of Brian, because you have to pay for your stones, and you have to pay for your wig or your beard, your false beard, because the women are not allowed to enjoy the stoning like the men unless they buy a beard. Yeah. And John Cleese recites the declaration that you must not create false gods. Yeah. And that's why they hit on the Jehovah's, because the Jehovah's dogma says that they believe in the one true God, yeah, and they don't believe in messianic religions, but they talk about Jesus all of the time, and he's in all of the stories, because it's a massive money stream for the whole of world history. The martyrdom of Stephen is a posthumous honour to Stephanus, another anus. Which reminds me of my brother-in-law, but I do not like to talk about that because it's really sinful. The slave of Domitilla, Emperor Domitian's niece, who had helped kill the emperor in Rome just before the writing of Acts, he becomes the gentle Stephen, whom the Jewish mob stones, but Acts does not state he died, but only that he fell asleep. Acts 7:60. For he was in fact killed in Rome by those not involved in the plot, who rushed in, presumably Domitian's bodyguards. 2 years later, in 98, Nerva dies and Trajan becomes emperor. He was married to Pompeia. Yeah, we've talked about Poppaea yesterday, and Nero's wife, and that is the launch of the poppies to commemorate the dead, and another capitalist profit stream. Yeah, a vicious genocidal profit stream run by Butcher Haig, then by Prince Philip for a few decades, and now the Legion is run by the Duke of Westminster, born Britain's richest man. Her true name was Claudia Phoebe. She was Piso's daughter. The family now ruled the world. Acts was soon finished, and the epistles, yeah, everything has the words in. Yeah, the pistor, the epistles, the pistols, the pistols with the O in it, were being written between 100 and 105 while they were writing the New Testament epistles and the Gospel of John. The Pisos were creating the embryonic church. Yeah, most of them in this region, they soon cotton on to the fact that the lightning conductor is not efficient enough, so you need to build a stone roof. Okay? Justus, his father Pliny, their family, friends and their slaves travelled about Bithynia, Pontus, that's in the Black Sea region, where the Amazons come from, and where all of the stories about Pharnaces and all of the wars that were fought there for those massive lands. Yeah, and that's the Gerson territory, where the Rangers mythology and the sectarian division comes from. It also launches the Osmond family, yeah, and the Queen's corgis, as we talked about yesterday. And the Queen today is looking a little bit more exhausted than she did 2 days ago when I complimented her on her appearance. Yeah, but she's making the speech today, and David Cameron is able to say that their policy making is her fault. It's the Queen's speech today. It's pissing down outside. Yeah, And the province of Asia, yeah, that's a very appropriate terminology, because the whole of Asia belongs to Europe and the elites there. Okay, that's China, Russia, all of the South Pacific countries, all of them are run like puppets, and all of them get demonized whenever we need a nuclear cover. That is North Korea now, and the hopeless little boy that runs that country, because he was picked to be a hopeless little boy that runs that country but has no power at all. He's the scapegoat, and he lives it up like his dad did. Yeah, and that is the whole of the power base all across the Arabic nations too. There are no democracies. We have one in Britain. It's a tokenistic effort. They're all profiteers. They're all picked for their sins. And the Greek cities, and later Alexandria and elsewhere, to create the churches, to gather the slaves and poor people into the new faith. They're the victims all of the time, and they think it gets them a life in eternity. I cannot comment on that, because I'm only a mortal and I don't understand it. As the public writings under Piso's name of Josephus, coupled with the synoptic gospels, are the method to find him as the creator of the Jesus story, so are the writings of Pliny, both the public and private ones, the method to glimpse the creation of the church. From the letters of Pliny, one can unravel the members of the Piso family under their various pseudonyms, and can notice the comings and goings of the family across Bithynia and the adjacent provinces. From the letters of St. Ignatius, another fictitious character, a massive figure in world religion, totally fictitious. Yet he launches the Jesuits and the new Pope. The Jesuits are the most vicious. Their oath is terrible. Yet it is terribly brutal. It is terribly ambitious to take over the whole world, and then to get rid of the real Christianity that underpins it. That's the black popes. Yeah, that's the man whose name was Kolvenbach, that was brutalizing Syria and the Lebanon for a full decade, when Benedict, the German Nazi, was in charge. Okay, Bithynia, and from the letters of St. Ignatius, the false St. Ignatius, which is why the Abelard Reuchlin has placed it in inverted commas, yeah, which are also by Pliny, one can see him writing to the various family members and friends as they start the first churches. Pliny created the first churches in Bithynia and Pontus, that's Ukraine, commencing about 100, once Acts of the Apostles were completed. And Pontus means bridge, and getting across the bridge is really difficult, because that's where people get executed, and the high points above bridges in Washington now are no longer part of the route for the new president, because they can be taken out there like Kennedy was, from the grassy knoll. Okay, but that was not his first tour of duty there, nor did his tour cover a mere few years, ending about 112 AD, as is presumed from his public writings. He was in Pontus and Bithynia repeatedly between the years 85 and 112. The method to deduce his many tours is the appearance of his pseudonym, Maximus again, repeatedly, with various second names in his public letters. From his letters he appears as Terentius Maximus, procurator for Emperor Domitian in Bithynia, and he was there even back in 85 to 86. We still have procurator fiscals in law enforcement in inverted commas, yet it's just as corrupted as religion. As proconsul under the name Lapius Maximus, all the careers of various people named Maximus, each of which was Pliny. Yeah, that's the big false news writers of our globe, who stole our globe using their deceit and their skills with the pen and the newly discovered ink. the blue ink that was discovered in Canaan. Yeah, and that's why Billy Connolly makes the jokes about fucking blue. Yeah, when he's fishing the elite rivers in Scotland, yeah, as the ordinary working man who is the riveter in the shipyards, okay? Each of which the authors named Maximus, each of which was Pliny, appear in his own public letters. This leads us to the source of the first name of Pontius Pilate. Yet he's the judge on whether or not Jesus is guilty or innocent. He leaves that decision to the locals. And it reminds me of me taking my petition around my neighbourhood and asking them if they could just honestly state roughly when my wife left my home. But because my wife works in league with the Prime Minister in England and the Rothschilds in Hertfordshire, all of them fear that there's something vicious will happen to them, but they do not understand the acts of God that happen all of the time. People who are prepared to condone religious frauds or to put people down who are the innocents, who are trying to expose it. Yet he in fact was named merely Pilate or Pilatus. He was only Pilate when Philo of Alexandria discussed him about the year 45 in his writings. He mentioned him only in connection with the incident of the shields. Now I don't have enough biblical knowledge to know what that is. Pilate remained merely that in the first two Gospels, Matthew chapter 27 and Mark chapter 15. Only in Luke 3:1 does Pilate acquire the additional name Pontius. That was because in 85 to 90 Pliny was assisting Piso writing the third Gospel, Luke, so Piso honoured him by adding the name Pontius, which was a variant form of Pliny's province Pontus. Yeah, do you get it? And that is the joke about the bridge and Horatio at the bridge. To Pilate's name, and there are people called Pont or derivatives of it in this town. They come and talk to me all of the time. It's amazing how the bloodlines get all over the world, but that's globalism, and I understand all of that as well. For Pliny had already been serving a term as governor there. Later, twice more, Pilate is called Pontius Pilate in Acts 4:27, written after 96 by Justus, then in 1 Timothy 6:13, which Pliny himself wrote about in 105 AD. The family also slipped into Acts in connection with the purported travels of Paul and others, mention of Pontus, Acts 2:9, and of Bithynia, Acts 16:7. Piso, as a fictional Jew named Aquila, this is where we started in this episode, is born in Pontus according to Acts 18:2, and the first verse in 1 Peter mentions believers in Pontus and in Bithynia. Pliny's letters show that Justus too was in Bithynia between 96 and 98 AD, and he was proconsul there under the name Tullius Justus. Piso also shows his presence in these provinces. Yeah, so that's the Ukraine, that is the Black Sea borders, that is Odessa, to add some sinister connotations to it, because the Odessa dream is the Christmas dream. Yeah, that's the laundering of the Nazis through Odessa, right across Europe, into Spain, into the Canaries, and hey presto, they're in Latin America, and they're still fascists, and the poor people get it in the neck there. That's the Odessa Christmas dream. And John Voight is the name of the actor, and I only noticed today that in Elton John's vicious jokes with Elizabeth Taylor about celebrities taking over the world governance, yeah, that's the dangerous game. Yeah, you plant celebrities, you train them at Tavistock, they rant on a podium, or they sing wild songs, like the Rolling Stones, and all of a sudden they're in a powerful position, like Taylor Swift is alleged to be. Okay, I forget where I was going with that, and it takes me to Jennifer Aniston. Okay, so but what I was going to tell you there was that in the song about the dangerous game, what was it that I was reading there? And the Dangerous Game video with Elizabeth Taylor also features the woman in the blue dress who comes down as the fairy from the heavens in the Pinocchio film. Yeah, she's the equivalent, I believe, of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, she puts things right, she gives you so many chances. Yeah, and I believe that is the basis of the 5 pebbles stories. Yeah, about bringing down Goliath with the 5 pebbles, and that is the 5 mafia families in New York, and it becomes the 5 on the Fox News network that I talk to and communicate all of the time. 2 of them were private secretaries to American presidents, and they are very intelligent people. But all of them desert their nations. Okay? As Claudius Ariston, form of Aristo, he was leading citizen of Ephesus. That was the chief city of the province of Asia, located southwest of Bithynia, as Flavius Archippus the philosopher. Yeah? So you get the Achilles jokes and the Puss jokes all in the same name. The philosopher. Piso had been honoured by Emperor Domitian. The emperor commended him to Pliny Lapius Maximus in Bithynia, and he ordered Pliny Terentius Maximus to buy him a farm near Prussia. That is Prussia, one presumes, and the people of Prussia voted him as Archippus. The hippo joke, can you see it? The hippos is the Greek for horse. And a statue. Okay? And the arches are a feature of the Pontus. Do you get it? Etymology is fascinating. Dio Christosium, Chrysostom. Okay? So Dionysius and Christendom. Bithynian orator and philosopher addressed the city assembly, this same Prussia in Bithynia, lauding Diodorus, but with equivocal meanings. Yeah, it's ever so difficult, if you're an innocent, to understand all of this, and only because I've dropped out. It's so fascinating for me that I cannot stop now. Yeah, I will stop. I will try and publish some stuff, but I will probably get killed in that attempt. Yeah, the income stream is irrelevant to me. I want the truth out, and I know that the gods in the skies are working with me on that. Just look at the casualties in the last 2 years and the political figureheads that have appeared in the ITU or in the grave. So Diodorus meant the gift of God, by which Dio meant Piso, starting shortly after the name, and so Celine Dion and all of the links to it. It's massive, and that's the celebrities that Elton John sings about in The Dangerous Game. Okay, and the woman in that movie or that video is called Mandy Moore. Yeah, the Moores are the menace in the El Cid movie, and Michael Moore MP is no longer talked about. All of his sins are being covered up by his replacement, Alistair Carmichael, in every paper, in every day this week. Since I revealed the new cabinet are full of financial criminals that used to work in the embassy, in Washington, in the laundering sector, and in the War Office. sorry, the Ministry of Defence. I forget what that lady's name is. She's a tiny little lady. She does not trust the male gender, and I'm not at all surprised. Starting shortly after the year 100, and as they were finishing Acts and writing the epistles, they were travelling about the provinces. They pretended to be present-day apostles and bishops, the successors of the apostles Paul and Peter. None of them ever existed, who they explained had lived and written a half-century before. While Pliny pretended he was Ignatius, Justus was Justinus, Julius was Clement of Rome, Proculus was Polycarp, and Julianus, Justus's son, was Papias. Oh, you get the tits into the story now. Yeah, that's in all of the stories, on all of the papers, and it is really tragic that the human race cannot make itself civilized. It's a simple little step. They were reading for the slaves and the poor people who were new believers in the Synoptic Gospels, Acts, and also the Pauline epistles, which they were just finishing, but they were explaining that these had been written back before the middle of the prior century. However, Christianity was not done in a corner, as the words attributed to Paul in Acts 26:26. The intelligent of that day, the literate and upper classes, both in Rome and in all the conquered provinces around the empire, who profited from Rome's rule and supported it, knew what was occurring. About the time that Justus and his father and Pliny were starting the first churches in Bithynia, Dio Christosom and in Bithynia grumbled, "Surely you have noticed what some of our booksellers do." All of the booksellers are owned by the elite cabals now, and that's typified by Roxburgh Books, yeah, owned by Dame Edna Everage, after it was handed over by the Innis Cares, and that's the Ineos Jesus joke. But they're really nice people compared to some of the world leaders. That's the Duke of Roxburgh. The Duke of Northumberland is also a really decent bloke, but they have the blackbirds flying out of the Piso pies on the wall of their shooting lodge. Yeah, all of it, and that's Perseus in the Roman court, who's alleged to be a freedom fighter because he lopped the head off the Gorgon, which would be a gender crime in this day and age, because they, knowing that old books are in demand since better written and on better paper, bury the worst specimens of our day in grain in order that they may take on the same colour as the old ones, and after ruining the books into the bargain, they sell them as old. By the year 110, the New Testament, including the Pauline epistles, was substantially finished. All the books had been written except Revelation and Hebrews. I'll have to have a look at that. I'm not sure what that is. I thought Revelation was the last one. There have been difficulty with some Roman writers. Valerius Martial, I don't know what gender that is, although using pseudonyms for the Pisos, mocked and derided them, as he did almost everyone else in Rome's aristocracy other than Emperor Domitian. His closeness to the emperor, this sounds a bit like Jeremy Clarkson, permitted this, but after Trajan's accession in 98, Pliny graciously paid for Martial's passage back to his well-deserved retirement in his native Spain, where Maximus, the gladiator slave, came from, but they turned on him in the movie, and they killed his black-haired wife, and they shagged her and raped her until she screamed like a whore. And all of it is the same for the American Indians and everywhere you go. Juvenal the satirist too criticised the Pisos under their various pseudonyms, of course, in his 16th satire, which he addressed to Gallius, a former Piso pseudonym of Gallus, the chickens. Oh, pock, 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 pock. Yet all through the Jordi of Wiedersehen pet jokes, and all through the jokes about Britney Spears singing with all of those cock crowing sounds and the chicken noises in her music. She dropped out of the Zionist training though. She has the capacity for greatness, but she's got many body doubles, which is a way of adding to your money stream. He grumbled at the privileges enjoyed by Rome's legions. Later the Piso's successors would truncate his writings appropriately at the 60th line of his said 16th satire. So that's the numbering codes for Calpurnius Piso that we learned yesterday, and I think that's one of the alternative ways of expressing that, in small numbers or in sequence numbers. Other writers were cooperative, for there was peril in non-cooperation. Yeah, that's the Assassination Bureau, or the Black Slave called Aphrodite, yeah, who got Nero. And Nero was portrayed as being a fiddler, just lapping up all of the niceties of life and all of the luxuries and women in the Mithraeum, or whether it was little boys was your taste. Yeah, the Mithraeum and the orgy are still part of the elite fascist world. Yeah, and that was proven in the UK in 2010 when I forget what the name of the newspaper magnate is that's a cover for the Aitkins, but he was convicted and tried of running orgies in Nazi uniforms, all of it to take the crimes of Rupert Murdoch and the massive crimes of Rupert Murdoch in choosing the next emperor in Westminster. Yeah, that's Cameron. He visited Murdoch on his yacht 20 times. Yeah, it's a total stitch up. Lizzie Murdoch is on the Chipping Norton set. No one wrote unless he was permitted by the emperor. The latter and the aristocracy were the financial patrons of the writers. Thus Statius, the poet, had written admiringly to the various members of the family during Domitian's reign. Later, after the year 100 AD, appeared the writings of Plutarch. Piso was his patron and the family were his friends. He was not 100% convinced. That's why I'm telling you about Rupert Murdoch. Yet the template is different, the names are slightly different, it's still pissing down outside. Okay, he was not 100% convinced, but he was cautious. He wrote, after dinner, even common unlettered people. Yeah, I only got a C in English, and I think most of you will be able to tell that. Yeah, luckily I got a C and I became an educated person, and I can find out all sorts of facts that others struggle with. Yeah, that's law enforcement globally. I can find out everything that the world needs to know to become civilized and law-abiding. None of the law enforcers are obliged to do anything in that sector. They get nice uniforms and they've got vicious instruments hanging from their belt to persecute the ordinary people who do not have the money or the power base to make them manipulated. Yeah, it's absolutely tragic. After dinner, even common unlettered people allow their thoughts to wander to other pleasures. They take up conundrums and riddles, or the names and numbers game, or they play Candy Crush, a joke about the candy slush villa, castle. Yeah, I forget the name of it. The Candy Slush. Slush is a mansion in Austria, and that's where Mrs. Simpson was with the abdicated king when they were waiting for her divorce to come through. She's a fascist too. She toured all of Europe before World War II was started. The names and numbers game was called in Greek isopsepha. The total values of a name's letters were equated with the total letters of another name, and this is the coding system we learned about in video 2. That was precisely what the Pisos were doing with small numbering, and that is what Plutarch was hinting at. By the year 115, the success of the Pisos' creation seemed assured. Yeah, so the biggest religion on the globe and the biggest power base in the world and in all of world history. Thus far, only Josephus himself had dared to historicise Jesus, and that only in a brief paragraph. The Testimonium Flavianum in his Jewish Antiquities about the year 90, plus a brief mention of the purported death of Jesus' brother James. Of course, Philo of Alexandria, I don't know whether or not this sentence will continue on the next page. It does not. Okay, so we start on page 17 now on the PDF, because this is chunks of little stories in the books that Abelard Reuchlin published. Okay, it's page 17 of the PDF, but that sentence there stops at Alexandria, and we start with a word which is cut in half. Okay, with the incident of the Roman shields, reference 17, did not nor could he make any mention of Jesus nor the Christian story. Now the family had other writers place Jesus and Christianity in prior history. First, the Pisos used their friend Cornelius Palma, the jurist, writing under the name Cornelius Tacitus between 115 and 120. He mentioned Christ and said he had founded the Christians and been crucified by Pontius Pilate, and also detailed that Nero had caused Christians to be torn by dogs and burned on crosses. Okay, then Suetonius. Remember that Barry Suetorius is President Obama, and President Obama is not an American citizen. Then Suetonius Tranquillus too historicised Nero's persecution with the mere statement that punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a new and mischievous superstition, reference 19, and elsewhere said that Emperor Claudius, who ruled 41 to 54, had expelled the Jews from Rome for constantly making disturbances at the instigation of Crestus. I think that's a ski slope somewhere in Switzerland. Oh no, it's Cresta, sorry. Suetonius was historicising the story appearing in Acts of the Apostles that Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome, but perhaps he was hinting at the identity of him whom he was honouring with this account, for he had deliberately this time misspelled the Christus name with an E instead of an I. Cresta. Although he wrote in Latin, perhaps his intent was to make the spelling in Greek with the E total in small numbering, therefore 26, and hence the same as KP by the sequence, that's Copernicus Piso, by the sequence system, instead of it being 22 if spelled normally as Christus. Ex Christos. Yeah, so there's the 22 word and the links to Christ. Yeah, and that is Taylor Swift. That is the laundering cover. That is the joke about the Pisos, and when KP Nuts comes up, it causes a panic attack now, because that's Kenyan product and it's Calpurnius Piso. Right then, Suetonius cooperated perfectly like the American president does. Yeah, he's groomed and picked for that role in all of his time in the back room, for his name was a pseudonym for his true name, Titus Antoninus. He was Claudia Phoebe's elder son and Piso's grandson. Piso had taken him into his home and reared him when his father Rufus died about the year 93. In the year 138 he would become emperor, and then do further writings under his pseudonyms as church fathers. Okay, so you're the emperor and you're the equivalent of Rupert Murdoch. That's hard work. Yeah, Rupert Murdoch does not do a stroke. He manipulates the strategy. He does not write the articles. These are really clever people. First he wrote as Tatian